Okay. So once again, just another welcome to those watching online. I think we've overcome some of the technical issues. Welcome to, I see some new faces here. Are you new? This is the first time to Conscious Living? Or?
First time.
Oh, well, welcome. Afterwards we'll get to know you better. So, just a few announcements. Again, Conscious Living is a non-for-profit organisation whose mission is to study and disseminate spiritism. Are you for our new friends here, are you new to spiritism, or do you know anything about spiritism?
Yeah, we practice spiritist science like some years from Brazil, so
Okay.
we already went to some groups and every Sunday, so we already know it.
Great. Oh, it's great to have you.
About 4 years.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to set up the meeting with just a few announcements, mainly things that are happening in the Spiritist movement outside of just this group. Let me fast forward here. There we go. In a few weeks' time, beginning of April, I think it's the 6th and 7th of April, we have the annual symposium. This year it's going to be in Orlando. 4 speakers from Brazil. The speakers will have simultaneous translation in English and Spanish. And some excellent speakers, Divaldo Franco, a young 96 years old, amazing. Really, it's an opportunity not to miss. And the event as well is not just the speakers, but it's just a gathering of 4 or 5. Last year was 500 here in Miami. This year in Orlando, and possibly more. I think the location is even bigger. But it's just an amazing event, just for the meeting of people, new people, and all this energy that having so many spiritists together creates. So it's an amazing experience. Also coming up later this year, and this time in Boston, this is the US Spiritist Federation's symposium, annual symposium. It's the 18th time, and this is in Boston. There's more information coming on that. And a few announcements about our ongoing activities in the centre here. We have our Sunday meeting in English. We also have one on Tuesday in Portuguese. But also we have some classes online and actually in person. This one every 2nd and 4th Wednesday, where Susanna is guiding us through the Spiritist Review. And there's a lot of material there, 12 years of material, and we'll be working for a long time on that. But it's
rest of our
excellent.
incarnation.
Yeah, probably the next thing. I think we've been going for, 1 year? And we're at the 3rd chapter of the first book of 12. So, hey, good morning. So that occurs on every 2nd, 4th Wednesday, 6:30 on Zoom. The ID and passcode can also be found on our website. Similarly, on a Sunday mornings at 9 o'clock, Carlos and I facilitated a study of Genesis. We've been going for 2 years now, and we're in the chapter on miracles. Again, welcome to join us. 9 o'clock, a little early, but it's worth it. We have a group of about 15 of us from all over the world, in fact, a very international group from Philippines and Brazil, many states in the US. And then on Wednesday night, 9 o'clock, the rounds of mediumship, guided by Carlos again. So we've got an early and late one, if you like, depending on your morning person or night person. Okay, so we'll come on to the reading of today, taken from the book Happy Life by Spirit Joanna De Angelis, psychographed by Divaldo Franco, who again is coming to our conference next in April. So number 66 is today's reading. Be open to new concepts and ideas. Talk them over and compare them to what you already know and think, making the best of the new information. Sound ideas reinvigorate your emotions, supplying the sentiments with motivation and enthusiasm. No one is so wise or complete that he or she can dispense with further learning or additional contributions for inner growth. Learn more by being receptive to fresh input. And I'm now retired, and I find myself studying more and more, reading more and more, and there's such an amazing amount of information now with the internet. You use it wisely. YouTube, talks, podcasts, so much information. And I find I'm learning more and more the older I get, and it's such as this message says, very invigorating, and it's all part of our inner growth. And on the Spiritist side, there is so much information now in English, which when I first came into Spiritism like 14 years ago, really there wasn't much beyond the the Codex books, but nowadays there's many, many books in English, all available and accessible. So with that, I'd like to invite you all to our just a short opening prayer, helping us calm our minds and connect with the good spirits that are here with us, here with the folks that might be watching online. So be with us, helping us absorb the message of today. This is why we come to the center, this is why we watch this meeting, so we can be reminded of the good points of the Spiritist doctrine. It's an amazing amount of knowledge that can help guide us make better choices, and lead a better life. So again, we're thankful and grateful for their presence, and we particularly ask for the guardian angel of our dear friend Andreia, who will be delivering the message today. Help her to deliver it with love, with clarity, so we can all take that message home and apply it in our daily lives. Again, thank you so much, and so be it. Okay, Andreia, it's over to you.
Well, good morning, and welcome our first-time comers here, and also those who are following online. Just wanted to let you guys know in the back. What's your names, by the way?
Lincoln, Miguel, Vito, Tatiana.
My name is Andreia, so welcome. I just wanted to let you know that the event that is happening in Orlando with Divaldo Franco, Alberto Almeida, Denise Lino, and Eulalia Bueno, we'll have activities for the youth as well. So ages 9 through 17, of course, broken down in the groups, pre-teens and teens. So if you guys want to go, you can certainly bring your child and your teen. Compassion. From chapter 13 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, main topic, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. We did the Gospel at home, or the worship at home, if you want to call it, a few weeks ago, and we always open by chance, my husband and I, and we opened in this item, 17, compassion. I was blown away by its beauty. I said, my God, people need to read this. It dawned on me that people might have read it, but I was in a special place in which it really spoke deep in my heart. And Michel, the spirit author who brings us this instruction on this chapter, he was simply amazing in the way in which he described compassion, allowing us to perhaps bring it in a modern way, especially in dealing with each other, compassion towards others and self-compassion as well. So what I like to do is first go through the message with you guys, so bear with me, and then we can go back and try to dissect a little more some of the parts of this beautiful message. Compassion is the virtue that brings you closer to the angels. It is the sister of charity, which leads you to God. Allow your hearts to be moved with compassion before the miseries and sufferings of your fellow beings. Your tears are a balm which you pour out on their wounds. And when out of kind sympathy you manage to restore their hope and resignation, what delight you will feel. Such delight will of course contain a certain bitterness because it is born alongside misfortune. However, since it does not have the acrid taste of worldly delights, neither does it have the pungent disappointments of emptiness that worldly pleasures leave in your wake. There is a penetrating gentleness that fills the soul with joy. Compassion, deeply felt, is love. Love is devotion. Devotion is forgetting oneself. And this forgetfulness, this self-denial on behalf of the unfortunates, is virtue par excellence. The kind that the divine Messiah practiced through his life and taught in his holy and sublime doctrine. Once this doctrine is returned to its primitive purity, When all peoples have accepted it, it will bring happiness to the earth, enabling harmony, peace, and love to finally reign. The most appropriate sentiment for enabling you to progress by subduing your selfishness and pride, the one that predisposes your soul to humility, beneficence, and love for your neighbor, is compassion. That compassion which expresses itself within you at the sight of your brothers and sisters suffering, which impels you to reach out to them with a helping hand, and which moves you to tears of sympathy. Therefore, never smother this heavenly emotion in your hearts. Do not allow those hardened, selfish people who avoid the afflicted because the sight of their misery would upset them for a few moments of their carefree lives. Fear remaining indifferent when you could be useful. Peace of mind, bought at the price of culpable indifference, is the peace of mind of the Dead Sea, which hides fetid slime and decay in its depth. However, how far compassion is from causing the trouble and annoyance the selfish person is so afraid of. Without a doubt, on contact with another's misfortune, the soul rebounds upon itself and experiences a natural and profound ache that makes its entire being vibrate and affects it so painfully. But great will be the compensation when you manage to restore courage and hope to an unfortunate brother or sister who is moved by the contact of a friendly hand, and whose eyes, moist with emotion and acknowledgement, turn to you kindly before gazing into heaven in thankfulness for having sent a consoler, a support. Compassion is the melancholic but celestial precursor of charity, the first of all virtues. Compassion is the sister of charity, whose benefits she prepares and ennobles. It's interesting because when we look at the root word of compassion, and thank you for your patience as I read that entire message, but there is a reason for my madness. When we look at the root word of compassion, we are going to find that the Latin root for the word compassion is pati, which means to suffer. And prefix com means with. So compassion, originating from compati, literally means to suffer with. The connection of suffering with another person brings compassion beyond sympathy into the realm of empathy. And this is one of the things that people get confused with, compassion and empathy. And we are going to find here, and this was taken from the Better Up website, that empathy is a feeling for someone in which I understand what you're going through. I've been there. That's empathy. But compassion is feeling for someone plus the desire to help. I can understand your distress and I want to help. So it's proactive. And here is the beauty of this. They will tell us that empathy is an important foundation emotion for human connection. But it's exactly that which will ignite. It is the spark which will ignite compassion within our hearts. I mean, are we compassionate? We have to consider this. Do we feel compassion naturally? Do we have this inner desire, that feeling when we feel the empathy? Do we allow that spark to ignite this great virtue that they talk about? As a virtue, it is something to be developed. It is not something that we are born with. It develops over time. They will tell us further that in representing the difference between compassion and sympathy, they're going to be understood and represented in the brain differently. This is interesting. And in the website, Be It Better Up, they say, with empathy, we join the suffering of others who suffer, but stop short of actually helping. That's what we do. With compassion, we take a step away from the emotion of empathy and ask ourselves, how can I help? Compassion is deliberate, wherein sympathy is impulsive. And they explain this. Empathy is considered the reflexive and automatic part of the psychology which originates in the emotion centers of the brain. Empathetic feelings, thoughts, and decisions are generated mostly of an unconscious level. That's what they're telling us in science, which means we are less aware and less intentional about those decisions. Whereas in compassion, it's reflective and deliberate part of psychology, which means that it actually originates in the cognitive part of our brain. We think about it. Compassionate feelings, compassionate thoughts and decisions, they pass through the filter of consciousness, which means we can deliberate, reflect, and improve on the decision. They further tell us that empathy is divisive, whereas in compassion is unifying. This is also interesting. They say empathy is inert, whereas in compassion we see it as being active. And lastly, empathy is draining, whereas in compassionate is a regenerate aspect of it. When they talk about this, they talk about the various aspects of what they mean by empathy being draining. When we allow ourselves to feel for another's sufferings, and we get so involved in it, and feel unable to do anything, and it's actually draining. And I know people like that. They actually feel drained by other people's feelings of suffering. Brings negative emotions. It brings experiences that over time, it's going to take a toll on our own mental being. But compassion is intentional and solution focused. It is centered on how to help another person. And it is so interesting because it is actually that which is going to deliver the added bonus of dopamine. It's going to hit us. And it's going to be that feel-good sensation of being able to have dried someone's tears by the action of compassion. Karen Armstrong, I've talked a lot about her here. She was the founder. She is the founder of Charter for Compassion. She defines compassion as that in which we are able to remove ourselves from the center of our world and place someone else there. So we stop looking at ourselves so much, our needs, our interests, that which pleases us, that which makes us gain more and more, and allows us to actually see other people, feel compassion, and take an active role in someone else's life. Well, isn't there the very same definition of love one another? Being able to see someone in need and take a compassionate stance. And so, we're going to go to the message now and break it down a little bit so that it can actually make even more of an impact. Compassion is the melancholic but celestial precursor of charity, the first of all virtues. Compassion is the virtue that brings you closer to the angels. It is the sister of charity which leads you to God. And it's interesting because going back to what he said, the precursor of charity, the first of all virtues. And we remember Allan Kardec's phrase, without charity, there is no salvation. And we start understanding a little bit more about the greatness of this virtue in our lives. Charity, as understood by Christ, benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness. Benevolence towards everyone, indulgence for the mistakes of others because we also err, and forgiveness for offenses. And reincarnation invites us to actually try to develop this great virtue, compassion, when it places us exactly where we are with the family members that we have, the challenges that we face, the genre of trials that we may experience in this lifetime. It is not by chance that Michelle, this spirit author, would come and bring us this instruction on compassion. He was on board. He wasn't in the spirit plane, nothing to do. He looked at us as a humanity in talking about the need to develop this great virtue. And so, if we want to help others, the idea is that it's going to be a comprehension that comes before compassion. Example, Compassion towards others in the aspect of indulgence and forgiveness. Terry does something against me. Usually Terry is not like that. But comprehensively, I will think, maybe Terry is having a bad day. And I will be compassionate for what he's done as the opposite of acting and reacting against him. Or if I see Raquel belittling me, and I may comprehensively think, maybe she's insecure about her own self. It's not true, by the way. Just, right? And so when we bring it to this cognitive, to the reasoning, we are going to be able to see that we feel empathy for her and we also feel compassion for the moment that she's going through. If we were just able to exercise this, and we mean exercise it because we're going to develop it. If we exercise our physical body, we're going to develop the body that we wish, right? But it's hard. And it's hard because we haven't worked out the part of the body that needs to be worked out. It gets easier as we have discipline and continue working out. Right, Susanna?
Correct.
Correct. Compassion and any other virtue is the same way. Emmanuel, the spirit author that usually writes through his sister Cândido Xavier, one of the greatest mediums that we had in Brazil. We have several books by Emmanuel, and as a matter of fact, he's actually one of the spirits who brought us messages in the gospel according to Spiritism. He talks about this. He talks about the need to be mindful of exercising the virtues so that it gets developed, so that it gets actually strong, and it becomes a habit in the nature of ourselves. There is a saying from the Dalai Lama. He says, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. And so continuing, Michelle is going to say, allow your heart to be moved with compassion before the miseries and sufferings of your fellow being. Your tears are a balm that you pour out on their wounds, and when out of kind sympathy, you manage to restore their hope and resignation. What delight you will feel. When we look at people and we become emotional, that melancholy aspect of it, because in order to practice compassion, something negative must have happened. The person is feeling an experience of pain, of suffering. Perhaps it's us. Something negative actually came before. And of course, sometimes we get moved. And we find here, in what he's saying, when we allow our hearts to be moved, this reminded us of many of the passages of John, the evangelist, in which he writes, Jesus moved by compassion by the paralyzed man, or Jesus filled with compassion for the woman, or Jesus seeing the crowd was moved by compassion. So we're talking about something that is going to allow us to take action. Of course, we're talking about Jesus. He is the excellence. He is the master. He is the model, the guide for humanity. And as a pure spirit, he has already developed all the virtues, of course. But since he is the master, we are disciples, we are learning. And when we see all of the examples, he was moved by compassion, allowing his heart to be moved, because the suffering of his fellow being actually affected his heart. When we cry with someone, they feel seen. Don't make it too dramatic, right? Otherwise they're going to have to console you. But when they see that we are allowing ourselves to feel this connection with them, finally somebody sees me. And there is no greater feeling in the world, I can assure you, to see someone stop crying and think about life and feel hope and encouraged. There is no money, no material success, no worldly victory that can compare to the feeling of the heart when we are able to be moved by compassion, help someone, and see the outcome of their suffering into actually feeling regenerated. feeling that our tear is that which is going to make their wounds stop hurting so much. It's beautiful. Of course, it's poetic, but it gives us an idea of how great compassion can be in our lives. Such delight will, of course, contain certain bitterness, because it is born alongside misfortune, of course. However, since it does not have the acrid taste of worldly life, neither does it have the pungent disappointments of emptiness that worldly pleasures leave in their wake. So it is an attitude, a mental attitude, the desire that others become free of their suffering. Of course, we're going to feel a certain delight, but we're going to feel, my God, we are feeling this because someone was suffering. Yet, the outcome is powerful. There is a reason why we live in society. There is the law of society, the law of work. No, that's not work. Labor. The law of labor. All of these divine laws that are actually applied in our daily lives, but we need to be aware of them, proactively aware. Not because we're fearful, not because of that, but because we understand that other people are in need constantly. And if I am in a moment that I am not suffering, that I feel strong, that I see someone in pain, the correct idea is that I'm going to be moved within my heart for compassion. This actually happens in Florida quite often when hurricane season hits, right? It is beautiful to see. It's a misfortune. It's painful, causes a lot of suffering. People lose that which they worked so hard for. Yet, we find other people moving, gathering to try to alleviate a little of that suffering for them. That's what is called being a child and children in God. And so, in studying and searching for this speaker in Brazil, he mentioned that when we are able to develop compassion and make it an exercise of doing so, we are going to become that essence in which Paul describes in his second letter to the Corinthians on chapter 2. He's going to say that the pure Christianity, the pure Christian, or if we can alter a little bit, the one who makes an effort to develop these morals, these qualities, are going to have the ability of being that pleasing aroma of Christ in their suffering lives. That's beautiful. So Henrique, because of being moved with compassion, he is going to take a stance towards an action towards his neighbor. And what Paul is saying in this letter is that he can have the ability to bring the aroma, the perfume, the scent of Christ as if he was walking among us. The person breathes that in and alleviates their suffering. Compassion, deeply felt, is love. Love is devotion. Devotion is forgetting oneself. And this forgetfulness, this self-denial on behalf of unfortunates is virtue par excellence. The kind that the divine Messiah, Jesus, practiced throughout his life and taught in his holy and sublime doctrine. And the truth is that when we are indifferent, that when we are unable of having the self-denial on behalf of someone else's suffering, eventually life is going to provide us with the educational professor that we don't want to meet, which is called pain. Pain is what humanizes us. Sometimes it is necessary for us to feel in our skin pain so that we can appreciate what our neighbor is feeling and be moved by it. And so we found in chapter 17 of the Gospel according to Spiritism this aspect of the duty that the spirits bring us in giving us an idea that in life we have responsibilities and duties in which they explained it as being an individual's moral obligation, first towards him or herself, and then toward others immediately thereafter. You know, when the captain of the plane says, you know, in the case of, you know, issues with the plane, the masks are going to drop, so put yours on first and then help your next one. It's kind of like that. Right, Susanna?
Yes.
Yes. And so, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, we are going to find that aligned with duty, we have the law of love, which summarizes Jesus' doctrine in its entirety, because it is the sentiment par excellence. Well, Andreia, I don't have the sentiments par excellence. Yeah, but sentiments are instincts that are raised to the high degree of progress accomplished. So we are working towards getting there. We are being mindful of our spiritual reality, our immortality. We start understanding that the law of love replaces the personality with the union of all beings and extinguishes societal misery. Oh my, if we were only able to love so much that we could change the face of the world right now. It is that which replaces the personality with the union of all beings. That's absolutely beautiful. But if we can do that in the world, could we do it within our home? Could we do it within our workplace? Could we do it within our spiritist center? Could we do it? Could we be mindful of the need to do it? Happy are they who, overcoming their human nature, love with a great love their brothers and sisters in suffering. So compassion opens the way for experiences that are more... Oh my God, I forgot the word in English. That leads us to plenitude. That is what opens the way for us to reach that. And that is why it's considered a virtue. It needs to be developed. There is a question on the Spirit's book, which is a book codified by Allan Kardec, released in 1857, if you're not yet familiar with the book. Question 894. He asks, the high order spirits. There are persons who do good through a spontaneous impulsive without having to struggle with any contrary sentiment. Do they deserve the same merit as those who have to struggle against their own nature and who manage to overcome it? And so they answer, those who do not have to struggle have already made progress. They've already walked that which we are still catching up on. They struggle and triumph in the past. That is why good sentiments cost them no effort and their actions seem to be easy. Well, of course, if I go to the gym with Susanna and she starts, working out with the dumbbells and it's like 50 pounds and I try to do the same, my goodness, I'm not even going to be able to look. I'm going to start at a 10 pound. But she worked to get there. That's why it seems so easy for her and so hard for me. Doing good has become a habit. That compassion which expresses itself within you at the sight of your brothers and sisters suffering, which impels you to reach out to them with a helping hand, and that which moves you to tears of sympathy, is a virtue to be developed in its excellence. We are already there. I doubt that there is anyone in this room who is not moved by compassion. The aspect of the firefly, I love to use the symbolism. We're like fireflies in the night. We go on and off, until eventually we become that which shines bright at all times. It has become very hard to observe life, my own, in a way that I like to share with you. If you could imagine the universe as a huge room filled with cabinets. And each cabinet has files and files and files on you. And if God allows you to sit down in that room and pick up the many files of your existence, because it's one life, many different existences, it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful story. It's going to show us how much we've evolved. It's going to make us proud of our progress and wish to do more. Because that feeling of doing good that, hits our part of the brain that releases dopamine, the feel good sensation, and we wish to do more, kind of like eating chocolate, they say. We actually are able to feel good because it is corresponding to that spark within our hearts. That's why it feels so good. That's why we wish to repeat it. There are times, however, that people take advantage of that. Right? Anybody here ever, assisted someone and, oh, yeah. Well, this happened just a month ago. Abigail, called me. We had helped someone who we thought was honest. And we helped her. And then we came to find out that she was using people and faking. So Abigail felt the need to apologize to me. And I said, why do you apologize? We felt the need to help her, and we did our part. She's going to have to deal with her own conscience when she really needs and finds out that it's going to be hard. But we are going to find, I want to go forward. It's not here. When they tell us to be careful, not to allow ourselves to become indifferent, especially when others act like that. She said, it's going to be hard for me to trust again. I said, it shouldn't. Because one person's mistake cannot be something that we are going to apply for everyone. If Carlos utilized my assistance incorrectly, I can't use his example and be hardened, smother that feeling of compassion within my heart to help out Araceli, who's really in need. I can't. What I'm going to do is bring that pure essence, the perfume, the aroma of Christ around her so that she can feel encouraged. So she can feel hope again. Therefore, never smother this heavenly emotion in your hearts. Do not like those hardened. Do not do like those hardened, selfish people who avoid the afflicted because the sight of their misery would upset them for a few moments of their carefree lives. A long time ago, I noticed that when people needed money, on the streets, I couldn't look at them. I just couldn't. And eventually, through studying and learning, where does that feeling come from? Really? And I started to look at them, even if I didn't have anything to give. Because by looking at someone with compassion, the ones who are anonymous, or better yet, those who feel that they don't exist in society, they feel seen. If I am able to look at them and their suffering and quickly, or as I'm driving, do a prayer for them, I don't know which spirit is there, guiding them, trying to get them to see themselves as divine, that they deserve more than what they're allowing for themselves. So I look at them with compassion. Fear remaining indifferent when you could be useful. Fear that. Not what others can actually have in our hearts. Peace of mind, but at the price of culpable indifference, is the peace of mind of the Dead Sea, which hides all the impurity, the slime, and decay in its depth. And so they continue. Without a doubt, on contact with another's misfortune, the soul rebounds upon itself and experiences a natural and profound ache that makes the entire being vibrate and affected so painfully. And for this, I'm not going to read all of it. I know Terry might know it by heart, but there is that parable of the Good Samaritan, which is found in Luke chapter 10. When the lawyer stood up and asked Christ what he needed to do to inherit eternal life, and Jesus said, do unto him what is written in the law. How read the law? How do you read the law? And the doctor of the law said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy strength. So heart, soul, and strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as yourself. So Jesus said, you answered right, do that. And then he said, well, who's my neighbor? And then he starts narrating the story of the Good Samaritan. If you remember, there was this man who fell among thieves and was left to die on the side of the road. And he says, Jesus talks about how the priest came down and looked at that man, feeling complete indifference, carried on in his journey. Then he brings the example of the Levite, that when he was at the place, came, looked at him. He actually looked. So he wasn't totally indifferent, but decided to pass by on the other side. But then came the Samaritan. And Jesus, man, he's really cool, because he uses the example of a person who was despised. Totally despised. And he says, the Samaritan came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. And what did he do? He went to him, bound up his wound, poured in oil and wine, and set him on his own horse, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. So when the doctor of the law talks about loving one neighbors, loving God, right? God with all your heart, the priest didn't really practice that. Love God with all thy heart, with thy soul, with all your strength, with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as yourself. The priest didn't do that, neither did the Levite. But Samaritan did. The true essence of Christian. This is why we see compassion as the sister of charity, whose benefits she prepares and ennobles. And to finalize this, if it makes it easier to remember anything that I might have said that might have touched you or not, there is one way to feel honored, to practice, exercise as much as possible compassion. And it is a line found in the movie called Same Kind of Different as Me. It is a true story by this guy who was helped. His name was Ron Hall. And when he was talking about that very amazing woman who helped him, I'm not going to tell you the movie, although, if you haven't seen it, I can tell you the end. Honoring her, he says, you never know whose eyes God is watching you through. It might not be your teacher, your preacher, or your Sunday school teacher. More likely, it's going to be that bum on the street. We never know whose eyes God is watching us through. We never know if we are going to be those eyes that God is utilizing to see someone else. That in itself is a huge honor. To be on earth that which is able to look at someone as if God himself is appreciating the moment to look at someone else. And just to finalize a little story, which is found in a book which is not yet translated, and I apologize for that. The spirit author Humberto de Campos writes through the mediumship of Chico Xavier, Francisco Cândido Xavier, that Peter was exhausted. He was so tired. People complained all the time. They were ungrateful. He was irritated because he was tired. And so somebody was approaching, needing his help. Jesus had already left the earth. And so Peter's like, I'm not going to help that man. I mean, he's not faithful to his wife. He robs other people. I have no time for that kind of person. Just seriously, not today. And then he sees a woman approaching. And he actually also belittles her. Not to her face, but pointing at her. And then finally, eventually, after complaining about different people, Peter is over there cleaning where he is when somebody touches him on the shoulder. And when he turns around, he sees an old man. Dirty, in need of food, drink, in need of his wounds to be healed. And Peter says, what do you want? Can't you see it's nighttime? I'm exhausted. It's not the time for you to come to my home. And before him transfigured the image of Christ. And he felt so embarrassed. He said, Peter, remember that when you're working on behalf of my name, I had left you with one last commandment. That you love one another as I have loved you. He bows his head because he feels his eyes filled with tears, and when he looks up, Christ was no longer there. And he understood the lesson and carried on. So perhaps we can be those who walk around with an invisible flask of perfume in which we feel it is the scent, the aroma of Christ. And when we see someone in suffer, we may open that flask, allow them to feel the essence while we are consoling, assisting, taking a proactive role in trying to see how I can help them at that moment. Even if it's with a hoping prayer, a hug, or holding their hand. On that note, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Andreia. A very powerful and very eloquent message to us to ponder on. Let me just make it. Actually, I recall talking about, I'm very much a scientific approach to spiritism, but I remember there was this experiment done by a Harvard professor in sociology, psychology, some years ago now, that he created an experiment. He got 50 volunteer students one day to participate, and basically he gave them, first of all, he gave them a test in the morning to establish the happiness level, should we say, very simple questionnaire. And then he gave them an envelope, and inside the envelope was either $5, $10, or $20, and a note to say, spend it on yourself or spend it on someone else. So they all went off and did that, and then they came back at the end of the day, told the professor whether they spent on themselves or someone else, did the questionnaire again, find out their happiness level. And those who spent it on someone else, significantly higher happiness, well-being, sense of well-being, than those who spent it on themselves. And he went on to do this in many, then bigger numbers, and then all over the world, different cultures, with always the same result. So, I mean, it's a selfish way of saying it, are we doing it for ourselves? No. But there are really, that what comes around goes around. So, but beautiful, thank you very much. So now we move on to the second part of our meeting today, which is prayer and passes. For those watching at home, I recommend you get a glass of water and take this time to meditate along with us. I ask the passengers to take their places around the room. And just to prepare us, not that we need much more preparation after this moving talk from Andreia, but let us be compassionate about ourselves. Let us really feel ourselves and feel the presence of the good spirits. They're here to help. Let's open our hearts, our minds, so that we can receive the blessings and help us on this path of enlightenment. And so be it. Amen. So as we come to the end of our meeting, let us all reflect on the messages today. To experience, to feel the compassion for others, especially in this tormented world we live in today. It's easy to get a little disencouraged, but what we can do within our realm of action is to be compassionate, show love to everyone we come into contact with, our neighbour, our friends, family. Even we can all practice this and spread this message, this world becomes such a better place. So let us go home, reflect on these messages of today, and try and put these actions, not just feelings, not just thoughts, but actions into practice as we continue our path to enlightenment. Thank you so much for the presence of the good Spirit, helping us, guiding us every day, our guardian angels, be with us always, helping us make those right decisions. Again, thank you so much, and so be it. Amen. So thank you, my friends. Have a wonderful week, and see you all again next time.